Hey, hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today I am going to talk about the changes that Ogryn received in the last patch, patch 18, Path of Redemption, which came out for Darktide, when was that, last week, the week before. It included, as mentioned, some balance changes for the Ogryn, mostly nerfs, but also some buffs. And I figured I'd go through them one by one and share my thoughts with you guys about how I feel about these nerfs. Are they justified? How impactful are they? Maybe also provide some explanations about why they happened. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Hank. I'm one of the community playtesters for Darktide, and I'm mostly focused on playtesting stuff for the Ogryn class. And as a result, I know a little bit about why developers do certain things, make certain changes as we test them and discuss them and work through them before they ship to the live game. We'll just start at the top. The first change that Ogryn received is a big and obvious one. One of his keystones, I think a pretty beloved one among quite a lot of you, Feel No Pain. So how this used to work is that you would gain 10 stacks of Feel No Pain, which grant 2.5% toughness replenishment and 2.5% damage reduction. This is still the case. Taking damage removed one stack, but only if you took damage to your HP. Any damage that you took exclusively to your toughness would not cause you to lose a stack of Feel No Pain. This is particularly powerful against enemies that do range damage, because how that works in Darktide is that incoming range damage from enemies doesn't do any damage to your HP until all of your toughness is gone. But if you get hit in melee, missing any amount of toughness will cause some of that damage to spill over to your HP. It's called HP spillover damage, mostly when people talk about it. So now you lose damage every time you take damage, no matter if it's just your toughness or just your HP. So for people using Feel No Pain mostly in a melee build, a Ogryn build, you know, bringing the shield, grenade gauntlet, Feel No Pain, trying to live out that tanky fantasy. The major change, the only real change to how these stacks work is whenever you take your first hit in melee, if you are at full toughness. It used to be that first hit, when you were 100% toughness, you wouldn't lose a stack. Now you take damage, you lose one stack immediately. Any follow-up hits after that, if you are below 100% toughness, would previously also always take a stack of Feel No Pain if you were getting hit in melee. So that part hasn't changed. That's still the same. The biggest difference, obviously, is for gunluggers who are using Feel No Pain, because let's be real, burst limiter override is not that great of a keystone. So simply becoming tankier and being able to stand inside a barrage of enemy fire and come out unscathed was, a pretty good secondary choice. And the motivation here was that Fatshark believed that it was too easy for gunluggers to get maximum value out of Feel No Pain, especially if you stacked additional toughness bonuses both from the skill tree and from curios. If you ran 3 curios, they gave you plus 70% toughness, and you also had perks for the additional plus 5% toughness, and you would pick up as many of these little, sometimes quite major actually, plus, for example, 25 toughness right here at the top of the tree, and as many of the toughness damage reduction bonus nodes that are in the tree. This one down here, this one down here, and the one up top. And you also ran Feel No Pain. You were running around with a passive 75% damage reduction, and you only started losing stacks once all of your 220, 30 toughness was gone. That was really hard to do, and it was very easy, especially when using Barrage, but also a little bit when Steady Grip, or simply being in coherency with your teammates while having Linchpin and toughness regen, perks, and curios. It was just way too easy to never lose any HP damage and never have to dodge any incoming fire, never have to take cover. Ogryn gunluggers with Feel No Pain could literally just stand in the open, return fire, and never take damage to their HP. They were just that tanky. I made a video about that a while ago, called it the Ogryn Tank Gunner, where I quite literally just face tanked a demon host while unloading into him with point blank barrage, and he never even came close to putting a dent into my toughness. So yeah, it was too good. It was too easy to get value out of. Now, if you get shot, you lose one stack of toughness. Now, if you get shredded by a barrage of bullets from a Reaper or a Gunner, or a salvo of bullets from a shooter or a stalker, does that mean you lose multiple stacks at once? No, there is. It doesn't. It's not listed here in the tooltip, but there is a 1 second grace period where you cannot lose more than 1 stack. So if you get shot, you have 1 second where you can take multiple shots. You only lose the 1 stack, and after that, you can lose another stack the next second. So it's not like they disappear instantly, but you do actually, if you want to maintain your stacks, have to respond. You know, return fire, suppress enemies, put them into cover, take cover yourself, use dodges to avoid some of the enemy fire, stuff like that. Is important to maintaining stacks. Now, of course, you can also see the stacks as a resource you can expend, because they replenish once every 3 seconds now. That used to be 6 seconds. So they come back very fast. So you could also see it as a tactical advantage. So you step out in the open, you're at max stacks of fuel opponent, you're extra tanky, you're going to face tank some bullets for a bit while you return fire. Consider it an exchange of resources. You maybe get down to 3 stacks by the time you're done shooting and everything is dead. And then, well, the stacks regenerate quite quickly. But there is an exchange there to be made. There's something to consider. And if you do that, you know, you stand in the open, you take those shots, you lose those stacks, you return fire, you're down to 3 stacks, 2 stacks, maybe 0 stacks, and then you get attacked into melee. You've expended your resource, and your feel no pain stacks are gone, your bonus damage resistance is reduced, and then you're in a little bit more trouble than you would be before. That's a bit of the mindset behind why that change was made, I believe, after having talked with the developers about it. And it's the third change that was made to Feel No Pain is that the bonus toughness damage reduction was changed from being additive to multiplicative. I'm not good at math, so I won't do the calculation for you because I can't, I'm too dumb. But what it basically means is that the more existing sources of toughness damage reduction you already have, the less value you get out of stacking Feel No Pain on top of that. Like I just mentioned like the figure of 75% before. That's because Ogryn has an innate 20% toughness damage reduction. It's not in skill tree. That's just a permanent passive that he retained from before the skill trees were introduced. And then there is a toughness damage reduction node here, 10%. Another one down here, 10%. This one, 10%. All of these are additive. If you take those 3 nodes plus your passive, you're already at 50% damage reduction just for existing, which is really strong. It's the best totally passive, unconditional damage resistance that I think any of the classes can get. Like, I know Zealot Martyrdom at like 0 wounds while having 7 of them gets a high amount of damage reduction as well, but you have to put yourself in like a very weird situation for that. And Veteran has strong damage reduction, but it's conditional on being in currency with teammates, or having more than 75% of your toughness remaining, or having just killed people with headshots, stuff like that. This is just 50% just for walking around. You can still get that if you, that part wasn't changed. These nodes are unnerfed, the passive is unnerfed. If you take that, you're still at 50%. But if you add this, it won't give the full 25%. I don't know the exact number that remains, but you won't be at 75% passive damage reduction. That'll be less because it's multiplicative now. But once again, I'm bad at the math. I'm not doing the math. Is it still good? Yes. But it's not as brain dead easy to get value out of as before. The idea is that you play more actively around gaining and losing stacks instead of simply building your character in such a way that you never lose stacks unless you fuck up. Then up top we have the 2 heavy attack toughness regen talents. We have Smash Him and we have the Best Defense. Both of these were nerfed from 25% toughness hit, either on multiple enemies or on a single enemy, to just 20%. Now, is that a huge nerf? No, I don't think it's super meaningful, but it is a thing. If you are at 0% toughness and you start heavy attacking and you have no other sources of toughness regen, it will take you 5 attacks to get back to full instead of 4. Might that lead to a scenario where you take more chip damage than you would before the nerf? Yeah, it's conceivable. But generally speaking, if you're at 0% toughness, you've already made a mistake. You've tanked a box burster to the face. You've been hit by a mauler overhead. You've just hilariously out of position. And those are situations that can always be countered by just playing better. In a normal scenario where you're fighting in a horde or into a mixed horde and you're taking the occasional hit here and there, previously, before the nerf, these talents were mucho more than enough to out-regen that sort of chip damage. And at 20%, they still are. It's still 1/5 of your toughness with every swing. That's really meaty, and especially if you stack a lot of toughness, which I do think is the way to go curio-wise on Ogryn these days. That means you are getting back still like 50 toughness with every heavy attack that connects with an enemy. Like, that's crazy. However, as you can see, this build that I had as an example, I'm not actually using the best defense anymore. Why is that? Because it's actually something I was going to talk about last, but it kind of feeds naturally into what I'm discussing now. Another one of Ogryn's talents, Unstoppable, an upgrade node for Heavy Hitter, was fixed/buffed. When the skill trees were just introduced, this, despite the description saying that it would increase the toughness regen, toughness replenished for melee kills, this used to say is increased by 10%. It used to actually increase it to 10% per kill, from 5 normally to 10%, which is really good. That's a good upgrade. Then at some point, somebody at FactChart must have seen the description and been like, wait a minute, this isn't supposed to double the regen, this is supposed to increase it by 10%. 10% of 5% is 0.5%. So a few patches after the skill trees were introduced, this upgrade mode was changed to give you 5.5% per kill instead of 5% toughness per kill. That's obviously terrible. It's never worth using, so nobody was using it, or at least nobody that knew about that change was using it. It got fixed, changed, buffed, however you want to call it now, to do what it used to do, and the description was also fixed. It increases the toughness replenished from melee kills by 100%, which means that you go from 5% per kill to 10% per kill again. That is a pretty meaty amount of toughness regen per kill, and for Ogryn, who has several weapons like the cleavers that get multiple kills per swing very easily into a horde, but also weapons like the shovel or like the shield that have access to brutal momentum, which makes it easy to kill up to 4 enemies at once with a single heavy attack. Those kills can now give you 40% just for landing those kills in a horde. That's very meaty, and I think that makes it possible to drop the best defense and Furious, save some points on these two nodes, and let Heavy Hitter and its upgrade node Unstoppable make up the difference for you in dense horde scenarios where you are actually hitting multiple enemies per heavy attack every time. And then you can use those points, for example, to grab some extra toughness, or to take Crunch if you're using a folding shovel and you didn't have a point to spare for that before, or to take Trample, which was buffed, which I'll talk about next. I don't think Unstoppable is a replacement for Smash Him, because this gives you toughness regen using heavy attacks against things like Crushers. It gives you toughness when you hit a Bulwark Shield. It gives you toughness when you're attacking an assassination target boss. There are a lot of scenarios where you're only using your heavy attack on one target, and obviously you're not scoring. If you're doing that, you're probably hitting a tanky enemy and you're not scoring many kills, so the bonus kill toughness regen from Unstoppable isn't helping you. But I would still, on a melee build, use Smash Him, and it's on the way to a plus 25% toughness, plus 25 toughness node that I think everybody should be running both of these on every build, because it's just so much extra toughness. It's crazy. But yeah, just definitely keep picking this. But you can sacrifice these two if you're using Heavy Hitter, because this is 1 point, and getting to the best defense is 2 points. And I don't think Furious is that good. Yes, it's free damage, but yeah, 2.5% per enemy that you hit previously. Like, it's kind of conditional. It's not active all the time. It's just, you need to hit, like, if you hit 5 enemies in your heavy attack, it's only 10% on the next one. I don't think this is going to make or break any break points or be very relevant most of the time. And these points can be spent elsewhere. Extra toughness is really strong. Other upgrades are very good. I could have put this point into Towering Presence as well and gained much more value out of my Coherency, Toughness Regen, any number of things. I mentioned Trample just now. That's another thing that got buffed. As you can see, the bonus damage per enemy that you hit went from 1% to 2%. Max stacks 25. Used to be that you could get plus 25% damage for 8 seconds with this. Now you can get up to 50% bonus damage, base damage. This goes for everything. It goes for melee attacking. It goes for, this is the damage that your bleed does. This is damage from if you pull out your gun and start shooting. This is everything. As long as you charge through a big-ass group of enemies. Now, 50 enemies is a lot. You might think, oh, well, average horde is 50 enemies, but no, actually, if you put 50 Poxwalkers together, it's bigger than your average horde. It's a lot of people. You won't activate that 50%. bonus damage every time you charge, not even close. But if you are in a super dense, hyper density scenario, as we like to call it, and you charge through a big ass group of enemies to make some space, knock everything down, you need to kill as many enemies in that time as you can to capitalize on that crowd control moment and to create breathing room for your team. That's why you're an Ogryn playing charge. That's why you're a Skullbreaker. You're here to beat motherfuckers up. This gives you such a hefty damage boost for those 8 seconds while you have the bonus attack speed while things are knocked down on the ground. It's really, really strong. It's a really insane power spike, and I definitely think that this is now the way to go over Pulverize. Previously, I made a video talking about why Pulverize is better than it looks, because you're able to apply the 5 stacks twice at the end of your charge, once when you hit an enemy, and then again when you stop and you create this collision bubble that applies the stacks again to anything that it touches. An invisible collision bubble, mind you. That interaction was fixed a few patches ago, I think at patch 17, which means that you cannot apply more than 5 stacks with this per enemy. It's just the 5, and 5 stacks of bleed, because the damage scales non-linearly, is not that impressive. So yeah, unless you're like a super bleed enthusiast, or you believe that charging into a group of enemies with Pulverize and activating maximum stacks of Delight and Destruction is more meaningful to you than doing more damage, I would take Trample every time if you use charge. This is basically just a mandatory upgrade. It's really strong. What else is there? Dominate. Oh yeah, this used to be basically the best talent on the tree, one of the best. Gives you 30% rending. The class overhaul update just came out for 10 seconds on a lead kill. That is insanely fucking strong. You could kill crushers with a Golem Stubber easily just by proccing Dominate on a different target first. Now it has been nerfed first to 15%, and here we are at 10%. I still picked it in this build, mostly because it comes after Delight and Destruction, which is really strong whenever you have Batter. But I wouldn't go out of my way to grab Dominate anymore on other builds. For example, a Gunlugger build. In this case, I'm actually using BLO to test it and see if it's worth it now that it got buffed a little bit. But I would not go out of my way for Dominate anymore in any build that isn't going to path through the left side of the bottom half of the tree anyway. Used to be that I would, even at 15%, it was kind of worth it for certain things. Using the kickback, using the stubbers, but at 10%, it's just, yeah, no, that was the final nerf that put it into nice to have, but not worth rerouting my skill build for territory. Not much to say about that. Rending is it's just really powerful bonus stat to have on a character, and I think it's a good thing that less of it is present in the Ogryn tree, and hopefully more skill trees will follow suit. And we already talked about Trample. Then there's Mobile Emplacement is on the other side of the tree. Now you take minus 20% damage while bracing a ranged weapon. This was 15% and is buffed to 20. Again, kind of like, what is plus 5%? Well, that's not that great. Well, it is. Any buff to damage resistance is really strong. As is any nerf to damage resistance. So as a Gunlugger, if you decided to stop using Feel No Pain because of the way it was changed, and you were said going to try and get value out of Burst Limiter Override, this is on the way. And the additional 5% toughness just for bracing your Stubber or your Ripper. Yeah, I mean, it adds up. This is still, I believe, an additive toughness damage resistance bonus on top of all of the other DR you can get from elsewhere in the tree, as discussed. So you will be at 70% damage resistance with your gun braced. That's pretty fucking good, actually. So, especially if you weren't using this before because you were pathing into Feel No Pain, you stopped doing that, now you go down this tree, you are losing effectively only 5% DR between what the old FMP used to give you and what you gain from using Mobile Emplacement now. And it's really good, but you just have to stay braced. But if you were going to shoot into a large group of enemy ranged units, that's probably what you were doing anyway. It's a pretty simple, just a good buff, part of a package that buffed multiple talents on the right-hand side of the tree to make them more appealing. This also happened to Steady Grip here at the top. This used to be 2% toughness regeneration while bracing a ranged weapon. This is now 3%. Minor, but still pretty good. Keep in mind it is 3%. It's not 3 toughness. It's 3% of your toughness. If you have, like I mentioned before, lots of toughness stacked up from your curios, this could be up to 7 toughness per second passively just by having your gun braced. And in that same state, you are also, if you run mobile emplacement with it, extra tanky, and you're permanently regenerating a bit of toughness. It seems like only a tiny bit, but it's 3% every second. And how, as I explained before, talking about the feel no pain changes, how incoming ranged fire works, range damage from shooting enemies, is that you take no HP damage while you have any amount of toughness remaining. So you are constantly regenerating tiny amounts of toughness, even if you're getting shot, and even if your toughness is really low. As soon as it regenerates a little bit, the next shot you take does no HP damage. And then the enemy pauses in between the salvo, or you dodge and you buy yourself 1 second of iframes, you regenerate another 3% toughness. The next shot you take deals no damage to your HP. So having steady grip, being braced, and walking around the level or dodging, zigzagging left and right while returning fire to enemies is a good way to keep your HP from going down at all while you return fire. At 2%, it was very slow. At 3%, it's still slow, but it's 50% faster than it was. And used to be, I think, as an Ogryn community, we have, at least me and my friends, the co-authors of the Argonomicon, have seen more value out of stacking a huge amount of toughness. And the more toughness you have, the more, in absolute terms, this regenerates per second. So yeah, I think it's actually pretty good and worth grabbing on a dedicated range build like I have done here on my Gunlugger build. Devastating grip, burst limiter override. Yeah, I was talking about Gunluggers. This used to be 5% base chance, going up to 8% base chance if you took more burst limiter overrides. Now 8% is baseline, and you can get up to 12% with this upgrade node. Now, functionally, without any of the upgrades here, the only thing triggering Lucky Bullet does is giving you a free ammo cost when you fire for one shot. So if you take just this one and just this one, the only thing that this upgrade does is give you 12% more ammo than you did before, because that's how a 12% proc chance translates to absolute ammo saved. It becomes 12% of the ammo you fire is free. That's not major if you look at what survivalists used to give for vet, or even just this upgrade. This gives you 25% more ammo in your reserves. This is better in terms of ammo economy than Lucky Bullet by itself. Well, fortunately, it has 2 upgrade nodes. Good shooting. Shot that triggers Lucky Bullet is a guaranteed critical. Is this really strong on most Ogryn weapons? I would say no, but there are some synergies. Rippers do 50% extra damage when they crit, which is pretty meaningful. Most Ogryn weapons barely have any bonus damage when they crit. And Cavalcade and Flechette as blessings for the Ripper guns exist to allow you to spread bleed with crit procs. Between good shooting, 12% proc chance, if you take this upgrade, Cavalcade, maybe a plus 5% crit chance perk on your Ripper, you can get a pretty reasonable amount of procs out of Flechette. You apply bleed at long distances while using the brace mode on your Mark II Ripper gun or something. Is it optimal way to use your Ripper? I still don't think it's better than just stacking plus power bonuses from something like Blaze Away and using Can Opener. But it is a build. And then there are the stubbers. Something I want to show you, actually, I'm not sure I ever talked about before, is that stubbers... Yeah, Stephanie. So stubbers... Yes. So stubbers, when they crit, they don't crit once. Look at that. They crit 6 shots in a row. This is one crit. All those those yellow numbers are all crits. It has a crit string, as it is called, of 6. 1 crit proc, 6 crits. Now, below gives you 12% crit chance, but effectively, because 1 crit is 6 crit shots in a row, that's like, I don't know, once again, I'm bad at math, but it translates into a functionally much higher crit chance, like 30%. And then there's also Massacre. There's also Massacre in the talent tree. This upgrade right here stacks at 1% critical chance on kill 8 times. Well, if you stack that up high, that's an additional 8% crit chance. There we go. It's 8 stacks. Let's reload. That is a lot of crits. And what is actually special about crits, especially on a weapon like this that has low innate damage into armor, crits have a form of pseudo-rending where they ignore a pretty significant amount of the damage of the resistance that an enemy armor type has against your shots, which is why I was able, with these crits and not any rending, because I'm no longer using Dominate, to pretty significantly damage this Crusher. Now, this is not an incredible amount of ammo efficiency, but it is pretty good. And obviously it stacks with rending from Point Blank Barrage if you were using that. So it has actually a pretty significant damage bonus for something like an Ackley Stubber to have a lot of crit chance. So there's some synergy there. But actually that's not the strongest part of Lucky Bullet or Burst Limiter Override. The strongest part is this right here, maximum firepower. 200% ability cooldown reduction for 2% for 2 seconds when Lucky Bullet triggers. Because I want you to look at this base cooldown, 80 seconds. And then we have Bruiser, 5% combat ability cooldown reduction when you or an ally in coherency kills an elite enemy. And then we have this. Every time Lucky Bullet triggers, we have 200% faster ability cooldown for 2 seconds. So every second that passes, 3 seconds of cooldown go away. I'm going to use my ult. Look at that. Between the Bruiser procs and maximum firepower, my ult has almost already completely recharged. And we can ult again. That's pretty crazy strong. So the biggest value actually out of Burst Limiter Override was always the ability to reduce your cooldown for Barrage, especially. And more procs just means more uptime on maximum firepower, which means a consistent. Look at it cooldown faster. It's basically triggering constantly, and I'm not even shooting at anything. I'm just firing, and boom, my ult's back again. Now this costs, obviously shooting that much costs a ton of ammo. You can really only play like this if your team is willing to let you hoover up all of the ammo pickups on the map. But if you're coordinating with your friends, or you're just really assertive in pubs and you're going to take all the ammo anyway, you can get a huge amount of barrages off per game, which is a pretty insane damage boost on a class that already does a massive ton of damage. So that is really good. And it's worth considering, it's worth using. Especially now that Feel No Pain gives you less obvious value than before. One last thing I want to talk about is not actually a change from this patch. It's a change from patch 17 that nobody really talked about, or at least I didn't. Where is it? Here. This blessing, Ceaseless Barrage, an old tier 2 blessing that used to only improve the amount of suppression that your weapon did, was reworked. Now, I'll read it to you. Plus 20% suppression and plus 6% damage against suppressed enemies for every 2.5% of magazine spent during continuous fire. Stacks 5 times. 2.5%, you might think, without thinking about it, oh, I bet it stacks really slow like Blaze Away. No, 2.5% of every magazine spent is actually really fast. Watch the buff bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom. I'm already at 5 stacks. This gives me extra suppression, but it'll also, as soon as I stop firing, stacks go away almost instantly. But they build really fast. So I gain bonus suppression and I gain bonus damage against suppressed enemies. 5 times 6% is up to 30% extra damage against suppressed enemies. The only enemies you can suppress are enemies with a gun, except the shotgunner. He thinks he's a melee unit in his head. But if you are building your Ogryn and your Gunlugger, or just in general, maybe you're even on a melee build and you just brought a Stubber because you want to fire back at shooters and gunners and reapers more effectively. This is the most effective damage boost you can put on a Stubber against those enemy types, because the bonus stacks almost immediately, unlike Blaze Away, which requires you to hold down the magazine. You have to hold down the trigger for half of your magazine before you reach the full damage bonus. Overwhelming Fire requires you to stack way more shots per enemy, and you lose the bonus whenever you swap to a different enemy type. And Death Spitter only triggers on very close range kills. The enemy has to be within 8 meters to give you a damage bonus, which is obviously not ideal if you're shooting at ranged enemies, because they won't be that close. So I don't really have a... Do I have a... Hold on. I'll show you a Gorgona without it. Shooting into this Reaper. This is the amount of DPS that I get. 1700. Now, I take the Gorgona that has Ceaseless Barrage. Now watch how fast this guy gets suppressed. It's not actually more DPS. I missed some shots because he fell over. It's not a very good example of the extra damage that I wanted to show you. There must be something about the other Gorgon I was using that was giving it more damage. But the idea is anyway, and it has been tested by friends of mine, and they did see an actual increase in damage, is that when... And actually the bonus suppression by itself is more useful than I thought, especially now that it stacks so fast. Is that as soon as an enemy enters a suppressed state, which is this, when they're looking for cover, they take bonus damage. And suppressing Reapers is really good because it makes them stop firing. Suppressing Gunners, same story. You only have to fire for a little bit before they stop firing at you immediately. They get up for cover. And then falling over arguably makes them harder to hit, but they're not shooting back, so it is a form of CC. And every bullet that you do land does more damage. I wouldn't necessarily put it on every stubber that you make. I don't think it's a must pick, especially because it doesn't give you a damage bonus against Ragers. It doesn't give you a damage bonus against these guys, against Bulwarks, against these taller enemies, against Maulers. But here, it is pretty devastating. Especially the bonus amount of suppression is actually more useful. The most useful trait here. Turns your gun into basically a big cone of suppression, and it stacks with the bonus damage that you get from this bad boy right here, Coward Culling. So everything you suppress more easily. This passive gives you, or an aura, gives you more damage, and your team more damage against suppressed enemies, and then you deal even more bonus damage against them with Ceaseless Barrage on your gun, the extra damage that it gives you, those stacks. So it goes from a meme into a pretty solid blessing, and if you're, especially if the Gorgon is really nice at shooting into shooters because it does so much damage per shot, it's definitely worth considering. If it's your role as Ogryn, usually something that a veteran does, but it's something Ogryn can do as well. Why not? Your role is to be an anti-shooter. Yeah, try it out. See if you like it. Oh yeah, and of course, talking about stubbers. Now that burst limiter override gives you a higher crit chance, the synergy with Charmed Reload is a little bit more obvious. More procs and more crits means more ammo loaded from your reserve into your magazine. I kind of stopped enjoying Charmed Reload after it got nerfed when the class overhaul patch happened. But yeah, with more crit from the tree, it's worth running this again, I think, especially on the Gorgon, which runs out of ammo a lot faster than the other two marks. Just 80 or 90 bullets in reserve. But also in Achilles if you just want to keep shooting forever. Here I even made one with extra critical strike chance on the perk and Charmed Reload here. Let's get some extra crit chance for Massacre. If you're in a very chaotic situation and you really just need to keep shooting and you don't want to let go of the trigger at all, yeah, you can burn through like 300 rounds easily before you have to reload. So yeah, those are, I think, the major changes for Ogryn in this patch, and it's what I wanted to talk about, give you my thoughts, especially Feel No Pain. I think that deserves an explanation why specifically those changes were made when you take Demonstrator Toughness and you still lose a stack, and why they regenerate more quickly as well. So thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, let me know. I'll try to give more information. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.